In healthcare, there is often too much information and not enough time. Here at the Melanin Initiative, we avoid TMI by breaking things down into language you can understand. We create a safe space for you to ask your questions and share a nursing perspective without taking up too much of your time. Today, we'll be speaking with first time guest Michael Whiteside. He's a licensed clinical social worker, PhD candidate, entrepreneur, and owner of Reclaiming Royalty, a telehealth practice that sees patients in DC, Maryland, Virginia, and Indiana. He's been so kind to lend his time and talent for 2 episodes. Today, we'll be focusing on mental health and addiction, and then he'll return to share his journey. If you're new here, welcome to the Melanin Initiative. I'm Dr. Kimberly Madison, one of your co-hosts here, along with Alicia and Geraldine, who send their love in their absence. We're a health literacy podcast offering our nursing perspective. When we say health literacy, we're talking about your ability to obtain information, to understand that information, and then to use it to manage your health and advocate for others. It's our hope that by watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, shout out to Angie, or listening on any of your favorite podcast apps, you'll be empowered to ask questions, educated on how you can manage your health, and confident to navigate the healthcare system. We have 2 missions here. One, that health literacy that I talked about, where we'll break down information like Michael's agreed to do for us today when we talk about mental health and addiction. The second one is to elevate the expertise of nurses, to bring awareness to all the career options in the healthcare industry, and to inform our peers of how they can leverage their expertise. Michael's going to help us do 2 of those today as well, and in his upcoming episode. If you haven't already, we invite you to subscribe, leave a comment or 2, hit the notification bell. This way you'll be notified when we release new episodes, and it'll show the algorithm that our information is important, so that when people like you look for information like this, we'll show up higher in the search results. Remember, this show is for educational purposes only. The opinions expressed here are our opinions alone. They are not a representation of any of our affiliations. If you're experiencing a medical emergency, you should seek medical attention and medical guidance from your healthcare provider. If you're having a physical emergency, you should call 911. If you or someone you know might be having a mental health emergency, you can call 988 or text 741-741. We're delighted to welcome our special guest here to the illustrious Melanin Initiative Mental Health Group. We're starting to stack up here. We already have Kelsey Wilson, another licensed clinical social worker. She's our in-house trauma therapist. She sees patients in Virginia. She's already come on and talked to us about intergenerational trauma, navigating the holidays with family, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. EMDR, also known as eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy, and cognitive processing therapy, 2 things she offers in her practice. She was the winner of the Melanin Initiative Emerging Leader Award for 2023, and she'll be back in the spring to continue her partnership with us. We have Dr. Ani Adaban, a doctorally prepared psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. She's the founder of Capital Multi Health Group. She sees patients in Maryland, and she provides primary care and mental health services. We just welcomed Kirby Williams, another psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. She sees patients in Richmond, Virginia, and she was kind enough to talk to us about bipolar disorder 1 and 2, as well as vicarious trauma in providers. We didn't stop there, folks. We invited Dr. Takesha Leonard. She's another psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. She has her doctorate in education, and she has a practice in Buffalo, New York. She has agreed to come and talk to us about pediatric ADHD and to share her nursing journey, which coincidentally started with addiction. Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest is the epitome of compassion, resilience, and empowerment. He's a seasoned mental health professional with a passion for transformation. Michael Whiteside has dedicated his career to helping others see their potential and live out their dreams. As the former intensive outpatient program manager for a local inpatient psychiatric hospital, he led a team that served over 600 patients grappling with suicidal ideation, substance use disorders, and more, expanding the hospital's reach and transforming lives. Michael didn't stop there. He became a clinical liaison, forging over 1,000 connections across the mental health field, driving emergency interventions, increasing access to care, and restoring hope to countless individuals. He's currently working on his PhD in clinical social work. He now serves as the general partner and clinical director of Reclaiming Royalty, where he focuses on empowering African-American clients to reclaim their power, heal from trauma, and thrive as their most authentic self. Michael believes that every patient has the innate ability to heal and manifest the life they desire, not just settle for the one they've accepted. Please join me in welcoming the transformative, tenacious, and trailblazing Michael Whiteside. Woo!
Hey, thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
And shout out to Shannon Sharp for showing how enjoyable it can be to give people their flowers where they can still smell them. So we're going to do a new little thing that we started. We're going to call it 5 questions in 5 minutes. We're going to give credit to Nancy Twine. She's the hostess of the podcast Maker's Mindset for this idea. So before we jump into our topic, we just want to get to know you a little bit better. So don't overthink this, Michael. Tell us, what's the next big idea you want to be a part of?
Next big idea, uh, really just figuring out how to convert maybe therapy into more of a subscription model. So that way people can get more holistic access and holistic care a lot quicker for just a monthly subscription, similar to what you do with Planet Fitness and a lot of other gym
Mm,
memberships.
interesting. What would you do if you could do anything for free?
Be a comedian.
Oh, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. That was actually my first childhood dream was to go out and be a comedian and be
Okay,
on.
so are you funny?
My patients think so, and they keep coming back. So it's like a captive audience, depending on how you, you prefer.
Does your wife think you're funny?
Oh, absolutely. She wouldn't have married me, otherwise.
Oh, well, maybe she has fun poking fun at, your attempt.
Exactly. I don't know if she's laughing at me or with me, but I'm assuming with me.
If you had to start over, what would you do differently?
Good question. I probably would be more career driven earlier on, have a more solidified area of focus because the field is so wide and so vast. I got to kind of get a little taste of everything versus really honing in on what is it that I want to do and what are maybe summer opportunities during undergrad that would actually help build that sooner.
I talked to Kirby yesterday. She said something very similar to that in terms of starting off as a generalist versus a specialist. And so, yeah, I think we're going to dive into that in the future in a special episode. And how would you like to be remembered?
How would I like to be remembered? Just for the work and the impact. I'm a firm believer it's not really about you or really so much what you do, but more so the lives that are touched. And ultimately, that is what lasts, even when you're gone.
And who would you like to give their flowers to?
And shout out to my wife for being the other co owner, so the other general partner for the practice. And of course, I'm a Christian, so God, who is the head of my life. So those two, shout out to them.
Wonderful. Shout out to them. And your wife, we had the pleasure of meeting both of you over the summer. That's the summer of 2024. Me and Alicia volunteered with Black Health Connect. They had a conference, and at the end of that conference, they had a free community health fair. And we volunteered with our blood pressure monitors that were so kindly donated by our anonymous giver. And it helped us with one of our missions here at the show, which is to increase the public's, and actually the motivation for the show, increase the public's knowledge about what is high blood pressure, what it does to their body, how to measure it accurately, and what to do if they see a number that's not normal. And so many people were there promoting their business, their practice, as well as you. And that's where we had the opportunity to meet, and you were so kind enough to come on the show, and here we are.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all that you guys do.
Yeah, we're looking forward to not only these 2 episodes, but moving forward, working with you and continue to bring forward the great work that you're doing in the DMV and Indiana. I mentioned so many times, we're happy to have a global audience and to bring people from all around the world on the show. But I have a special place in my heart for bringing attention and awareness to resources and people that are in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, because this show is really a love letter to my home, the DMV. And so you're helping me to do that today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay, so let's get into it. How do you define mental health to your clients?
Great question. So for me, I like to describe mental health as being the way that you not only process the world, but also how you process the connection with yourself in the context of living out your daily life.
And what about feelings?
Absolutely. So feelings are basically our indicators. And a lot of times when you think about feelings, and this may tie further into a discussion point in terms of how does gender affect
Mhm.
those feelings.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I like to teach feelings are indicators. So they're basically a way of understanding how the environment is affecting us. So when you think about mental health overall, it's really about what is the world giving you? What is your body absorbing that now is causing or impacting the way you feel about yourself, the way you feel about others, and ultimately your sense of safety? Indicators just tell you how those things are being affected.
Yeah, and so in our brainstorming session, you brought up a really interesting point. about how you even have this initial conversation about what feelings are when you're treating men versus women. Can you
Hmm.
just share with our audience what you've noticed in your practice?
Absolutely. And again, not to be stereotypical, but within my practice, right? And I got to give it up to my ladies because they come prepared. They're ready for therapy. They're like, hey, you know what? I know my emotions. I know what I'm feeling. I may not know why I'm feeling it, but this is it. And they give it to me in a nice love letter. And then we just pretty much dive in and get to work. Now my guys, a little bit different, right? They're more like, come on, bro. You know what it is, dog. I ain't really gotta put it out there like that. I mean, I feel two things, right? Anger and, and like joy. And depending on the day, right, I may feel both. So for us, it's more about one, giving permission to feel the whole spectrum because they feel it. The problem is not that they don't recognize it. It's more so, was I ever given the permission as a child to actually communicate what I'm feeling, how I'm feeling, and maybe even how severely I'm feeling it. So yes, I like to think, and sometimes I have to tell my guys, you're not necessarily crying. You may be more so emotionally sweating. Because if we look at this from a medical model, your body is always working towards homeostasis, right, Doc?
Yes.
Well, psychologically, your mind would be doing the exact same thing. And if we look at feelings as indicators that things are going on in the environment, your body is constantly trying to recalibrate to get back to that homeostasis or that baseline so you can feel safe, you can feel comfortable and more connected to yourself. So if sweating allows you to cool the body, well, tears and crying and even yelling can allow you to release that built up kinetic energy that is now stored in the body.
Really nice explanation. I'm curious, what brings, or what have you, is there a different motivation that brings men and women to schedule an appointment with you?
Absolutely. Women, they typically want better relationships. I mean, the world, especially for my black sisters who are listening, man, I am sorry. The world makes you sometimes feel so invalidated,
Mhm.
invalidated, unprotected, disregarded, and just disrespected. So a lot of times they have been carrying so much of that weight. And so now it's like, hey, if the world has been telling me X, Y, and Z, internally, is it true? Because those indicators, again, if we look at feelings like that, they keep giving this feedback that, hey, something's wrong with me, something's wrong with me, something's wrong with me. So then the question now becomes when they're coming to therapy, is it truly me
Mm.
or is it everything else or a combination? So then we can explore that. With the guys, I kid you not, I've been told this is probably the number, I would say, two or three reason men come to therapy. My wife made me. My girlfriend told me she's gonna leave me. Right? You told me I could be real and raw. Or, I want to be better because I don't have a great relationship with my parents,
Mm. Hmm.
which
I didn't,
typically,
I didn't see that one coming, actually. I didn't see the parent one. I mean, I know it's important, but I wasn't expecting that. Um, and then you said something I was gonna. Okay, and so when you talk to men about these feelings, are they like, "Oh yeah, I get that explanation," and then it's like all of a sudden they just open up, or what's that journey look like?
really good question. So with the guys, it's one of those, I just let them vent. Nine times out of 10, they need to vent because they haven't had a space to do that. Or they've been bottling up. And then obviously me being a male, I can then empathize like, I wonder if you feel X, Y, and Z when this happens. Or, man, I can only imagine. And now all of a sudden it feels like we're not in therapy, but we're just having guys' time. Like I'm just another one of the fellas. It's not any different than barbershop talk or sitting at a bar or anywhere else where they would feel most comfortable. So now, right, I become almost one of them. And if you can do that relatively quickly within the first five minutes, then not only do you feel safe, but now I know I can open up. And so then this is where the humor comes in. Because
Hmm.
again, what is more socially acceptable? Him lashing out, yelling and screaming, or him trying to laugh through the pain? And we know from my experience, right, being black, humor is a big part of it, right? We will roast, we will laugh, we will find some way to literally, as Kevin Hart said, laugh through my pain. So how many fellas are actually coming to therapy to laugh through their pain? And if I can, with my clinical ear, listen to all the repeating patterns, relationship dynamics, and such, it then opens the door to find out, brother, this is really what you're saying. And then when I give it back to them in a nice bow, right? They're like, oh, I didn't realize. Yeah, yeah, dog. Truth is, I am depressed. You're right. Or I like your definition of anxiety. Or this feels a lot safer to talk about than what it was introduced to me as on Instagram, TikTok, or even just right some sort of seminar.
Yeah, I love the way you explain things. I can see how you can get to that in 5 minutes. Actually, it takes a lot of skill. The easier you make it look, the harder we know it really is.
Yeah.
I know what I was going to say before when you were talking about women and all those messaging, especially when I was in my probably my 20s, probably the most, where you do get that messaging, is it me? And man, it really does play with your head a lot because you're still really figuring out so many things. You've been given a lot of data, but you haven't learned how to process it.
Exactly. And where do you put it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and especially when you are very young like that, and I think all of us in healthcare would attest. Once I see someone who's 20 on that paper, I already
Yes.
know anxiety. Whatever, it doesn't matter what they came in for. Literally, it doesn't matter. Anxiety is going to be the main thing we're treating
Hmm.
because in your head, I'm 20. I'm not supposed to be in this sick place with these sick people, right? And no
Yep.
matter what it is, it could be a headache. Someone else could be over there with stage 4 cancer. I'm the one who really needs all your attention right now, right? And it's really hard you want to empathize, but you have to prioritize your care, right? You're really just here because you're constipated. Someone over here really, really, really needs me. But you can't say those things to a patient, right? And so in my experience, anxiety in your 20s is just like, it's really dominant. So you just
Mhm.
mentioned that you explained to your patient, they like the way you define anxiety and depression. Can we do that before we move on?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So similar to you, I'm a firm believer, and my wife, if she was here, she would make fun of me for this because she's like, "You always say that." So I'm a firm believer. Before we look at depression or we look at any other mental health disorder or anything, everything for me starts with anxiety. Because anxiety, the way that I like to look at it at a base level, is all about being in a condition of uncertainty, meaning there's a challenge or a problem that you haven't quite figured out. Stress is your subjective response to being in that condition of uncertainty. So it is literally the expectations we place on ourselves about how we should respond to being in this condition of uncertainty. Depression is when you begin to lose hope that you'll be able to get out of this condition of uncertainty. Trauma is when the uncertainty becomes so overwhelming, it literally changes or mutates the way that we see the world as well as the way that we understand our place in the world in relationship to others. And then when you bring in grief, grief is an uncertainty about how to move forward now that this loss has occurred. It is an uncertainty about what will life look like and how will we continue living now that this loss has taken place. So what do they all have in common? Uncertainty, i.e., anxiety, even anger, which is a very misconstrued emotion. It's actually now one of my favorite ones to explore with people because anger, believe it or not, one way to look at it is another form of anxiety. As an emotion and as a feeling, it can be viewed as an uncertainty about how this person will remain committed to the relationship or an uncertainty about how this person will remain committed to the expectations and things we agreed on or how they will continue to meet my needs. So, as a tool, when we express anger, it is an uncertainty, right, about where this person is. So when you express it, it is a forceful way of pushing for clarity. Because if anxiety is all about uncertainty, healing is all about clarity. So, typical example. Have you ever seen, and right, maybe hopefully, right, it's not been you, it's definitely been me before. You ever seen two people argue and one person says, well, you don't love me. You never loved me. You don't care about me. I don't even know why you're with me or whatever. And then typically, how does the other person respond? What are you talking about? I've always loved you. I want to be with you. And then going back to that first person, they then respond with like, oh, okay. See, that's all I needed. Like, why can't we just say this more often,
Yeah.
right? And all of a sudden, everything's better. But if we really break that down, that first person, when they said, you don't care about me, that is really saying, I am uncertain about where I stand in
Mhm.
our relationship. I'm uncertain about how you feel about me. So now I'm pushing you to reveal how you really feel. It's a forceful way of pushing for clarity. Person two then reveals, and then guess what? The whole relationship is literally repaired because of clarity.
Hi, I'm Alicia from the Melanin Initiative podcast. Our mission is twofold. One, to simplify complex health information so you feel empowered to ask questions, educated on how to manage your health, and confident to navigate the healthcare system. And two, to elevate the expertise of nurses, spotlight the diverse career opportunities within the healthcare industry, and inform our peers how to leverage their expertise as clinicians and entrepreneurs. In less than 2 years, we've grown to over 50,000 views and 1,000 downloads, with an international audience spanning the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and more. Our engaged listeners are professionals, entrepreneurs aged 25 to 44 who value authentic, impactful content. Want to connect with this dynamic audience? Advertise with us. Send in your 1 minute video ad and let's amplify your brand. Email tmi.melanin@gmail.com for rates and details. Let's work together.
I think a lot. I can only speak for women, right? I think a lot. I think a lot of women would be saying yes, yes, yes. You have a great demeanor. It's the same thing I experienced when I first met Kelsey. Like even though we're talking and we're doing this podcast, I already get a sense of what it's like to be your client and how you can really let the walls down. You do a wonderful job explaining things. I love the analogies, how you break things down, how you find a point of reference to something that you're trying to explain that someone's still trying to get clarity on. Yeah, you're in your zone of genius. You've done a beautiful job explaining feelings, and I think that should help our listeners take this next step when we start to talk about the connection between mental health and addictive behaviors.
Mm-hmm. So when I look at addictions, and I'm coming from the position of more behavioral addiction. So when I say addictions, I'm talking about activities or behaviors that forcibly require you to continue to engage in order to maintain a certain level of joy, happiness, or content with your life. So for me, what I'm looking at for my spectrum that I see more in my practice, we're talking about right sexual addiction, sexual impulsive behaviors, pornography, video game addiction, social media addiction, any of those more less quote unquote physically harmful versus chemical, like such as chemical dependence. But when we look at addiction, the way that I love working with it for my clients, and I even have some now that, man, they're doing phenomenal. So proud of them. You got to understand the need. So again, if my wife was here, she'd laugh at me. But before we look at any of this, as I'm listening, I'm tracking what is uncertain for you. How does this addiction offer some sort of comfort that now is compromising where you really want to go? That's all it is. It is probably some sort of inner child issue that it now has manifested in a more adult world.
Mm.
So, yeah,
Oh,
like, sorry, conceptually speaking, right? Hear me out. This may rub people the wrong way when I say it. But if you really look at like people who are watching pornography versus people who are playing video games, conceptually, it's the same thing. Or if you look at the kids who are constantly attached, and for the parents listening, this doesn't mean that your child is going to be addicted to cocoa melon. That's not what I'm saying. But when you look at how do I handle stress, how do I handle the anxiety that I'm feeling about X, Y, and Z, these addictions just become another teddy bear. That's all it is. And then we can get out all the social dynamics, all the guilt, all the shame, filter all that stuff out, and now we can just see, oh, this pornography is your adult teddy bear. That's all it is. It's not anything different.
so you had mentioned something at the top of the show about how men haven't been given the permission to express their feelings, right? Where do you think that's coming from?
I think a lot of it comes from how are we teaching young boys how to be men? If you go back to the stereotypical, matter of fact, let's do a little small exercise, if you will, with me, Doc. Entertainment.
Yeah.
So when you think about black men, like famous, not necessarily maybe in your family, but famous, who are some of the guys that come to your mind?
Denzel, Jay Z, Obama,
Okay.
Kobe.
And Kobe. Okay. Now, those guys, great guys, right? Now, with the exception of Obama, maybe, what do you notice about the way that they carry themselves?
Confident,
Confident,
unapologetic,
unapologetic, yeah,
persistent.
persistent. Okay. Now watch this. They have to be dominant, typically in leadership, high
Hmm.
accountability, right? High
Mhm.
responsibility, never show weakness, extremely resilient, almost to a fault, always looking at the positives, and always having to grind it out, right? So doesn't this now allude to some stoic? You have to be strong, you have to be protective, you almost have to be willing and able to serve more than you can grieve.
And they're celebrities, right? But what about, and so you can kind of see where, so I might be answering my own question. So people who haven't chosen that lifestyle though, right?
Hmm.
You can still see that in some of, what we call everyday people.
Oh yeah.
And then people who might still be in those roles and maybe not as prevalent, they don't take on that role, right? Or those behaviors.
So hear me out on this one, right? They may not necessarily take it on to the obviously the full celebrity view, but if you just look at even the average guy, he's gonna focus on what? Being a protector, being a provider, being in some sort of leadership. He probably has some sort of high accountability that has extremely high expectations. And if you even think about some of the colloquialisms or some of just the phrasings, right? Hey, bro, just grind it out. Nah, man, you got it. Come on, man up.
Yeah.
What do these things tell us about how to maintain a certain identity? To be a man, right? I was literally talking to my fraternity brothers, and one said it best. If you're not unhappy, angry, always working, never have time for yourself, are you truly a man? Society would tell you you're not a man. Now, obviously, we have a healthier definition that is now developing in terms of emotionally available. But even in some of those healthier terms, listen to the level of responsibility. Those responsibilities all have aspects of uncertainty because you're serving others, which means you're trying to figure out additional needs and how to meet those needs in order to maintain happiness for the people that matter most. If you're always working, you can't afford to take a day off, right? You heard that saying, right? No days off. It's grind season.
Ooh, yes. And would you like to give a shout out to your fraternity?
Absolutely. Shout out to the Ice Cold Brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, '06.
Okay, so you talked about the addictive behaviors you mentioned. And I think for our listeners who saw addiction in the title, everyone's automatically thinking, drugs, alcohol, right? A few people might have started thinking about pornography, but I know a lot of people were probably surprised that you mentioned video games.
Hmm.
Do you get that a lot?
So I haven't necessarily got that a lot in my practice, but I hear so many times it's almost like adjacent. So the person who I'm seeing may not have the addiction, but they're bothered by the person who may. So there'll be a lot of men who will be depressed, but his only sense of community is on 2K, is on Madden. So I may be seeing the wife, the girlfriend, or the sister who's trying desperately to connect with him, but because he's emotionally unavailable, all he's doing is playing the game.
Yeah. And what do you say to those men who are saying, it's just my stress relief? Look, you just said, I have this high powered job. I have all this accountability. At the end of a long day, I just want to come home and I just want to, unwind. What's wrong with that?
Hmm.
I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not
Hmm.
gambling any money. I'm not yelling. I'm not hitting anyone.
Hmm. And see, it's funny, even as you said that, you just identify another level of uncertainty that he might feel. Well, why is it okay for her to go shopping or her to do all these other things,
Mm,
right? Once with the girls, but now there's an uncertainty because, again, how do we look at men? The man should always be working. I guarantee you, almost every brother here would be like, absolutely not, man. I need a break. So the game is not an issue by any means. The only time that something becomes actually truly addictive is when it causes you to compromise other areas in your life that you really can't afford to compromise. Now, if you're free on a Saturday afternoon, you're binge watching Netflix or playing 2K all day, and it doesn't affect anything, that's not an addiction. But if it's like, hey, I'm going late to work because I got to get on the game, or
mm.
my relationship that I care about and I have as a higher priority than the game is now compromised because of the game. Well, then you may start wanting to ask yourself, am I addicted? And addicted just means, again, I seek this thing out for comfort in times of uncertainty. And so now it's becoming my place of safety. That's all that means.
Okay, so I think we have a good baseline understanding. So walk us through a typical health evaluation.
Yeah. So typical health evaluation, person comes on. I explain, again, HIPAA confidentiality, which means I'm not talking to anybody. I'm not spilling your business to the streets. Only time that I even have to talk to, let's say, emergency services is if there's any harm to yourself and or others, et cetera, et cetera. And then I ask a very simple question. I'm not very traditional, right? Most are going to ask you 20 questions and try to find out. No, no, no. I've learned, and I learned this from my mentors. All you gotta do is really just ask one question, and the person, if you listen well enough, will tell you everything you'll ever want to know.
Ooh, we're listening.
So that question, simple question, as I like to say, in concept, difficult in application. And that question simply is, what is it like to be you? Yep, they make that same face. Yep, the deep sigh, the raised eyebrows, deep sigh. And then I'm big on body language. So I'm like, okay, we better get into the thick of it. So go ahead, tell me what it's like to be you. And the next thing you know, right, it's literally almost communicating permission to just let it all out. And then next thing you know, I start tracking patterns like, I've noticed, relationships seem to be real tough in this area. Or the person will say, I really want to talk about this, but I just feel like I'm rambling. When you shut yourself down, that tells me that somebody else in your life has also shut that down. So now I'm just nitpicking. I get my little scalpel, right? You would appreciate that as a nurse, and I just kind of, all right, let's go explore. And then we get to the deeper roots. I ask a couple of questions about how you grew up. Boom, bam. Next thing you know, mom done showed up, dad done showed up, sister, brother, cousin, people who hurt you. And then now we have this almost concrete conceptualization very quickly. What is it like to be you? Exhausted, tired, frustrated, resilient, but at a cost.
Ooh, that's a book. Resilient, but at a cost.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's when you make your diagnosis, and then are you having more conversation, or then do you start to offer your recommendations and treatments, and how do you explain this is where you got, this is how you came to this conclusion?
Mhm. So typically, as I'm asking questions about, let's say, certain symptoms, I may ask a couple of clarifying, like, oh, well, how often do you feel, let's say, this depressed mood? But then I also will give the language. So I'll give the definitions of anxiety, stress, because people won't say it because they're thinking about what does it mean in TikTok, social media, etc. But if I give my definition, well, now we have a shared language. Now they trust. So now they're open, like, yeah, I actually do get anxious about this. So after we get the diagnosis, then we'll talk about how are we going to clarify this. So let's say the issue is relationships. You feel like you're always being judged, i.e., social anxiety or social phobia. Well, if you always feel judged, that means there's an uncertainty you have about relationships. So then we'll talk about, here are the steps about clarifying and setting boundaries about how you navigate your interactions with others. So then we'll develop like a treatment plan. How often do we want to meet? What things do we want to focus on? And ultimately, what will it take for you to have a deeper connection with yourself? And what are your last goals? And then we just identify additional resources if need be, which I love referring to providers that may prescribe. So any sort of medication assisted if need be. Most people don't want to. They want to try out. Let's explore this, or they may have had a preconceived notion about whatever diagnoses that they may have been given before they met me. So now we're also playing with that, and then just really learning to love yourself and accept yourself.
Ooh, we'll talk about that again. And so let's say you refer them out to someone who's going to maybe prescribe a medication, and then are you also asking them to come back and see you, and how often is that?
So I like to ask, so how often would you like to meet? A simple question. I'll leave it up to them. Sometimes they'll say, well, it's up to you, doc. So then we'll say, well, that's actually, let's look at what are your finances? Because if you're using insurance, what is your copay? What is your availability? What is my availability? What times do you want? And then we schedule the next appointment, same day. So when they leave, you have your diagnosis. If you want to know, most people don't. They just want to know kind of the symptoms, which we can do a whole section on what diagnoses is supposed to mean versus what exactly do people misinterpret that as. So
Wow. Man, your wife, you must be putting her through a circle. I can only imagine the conversations y'all are having.
Oh yeah, she's a life coach now, so she liked it so much, and she started using it in her own practice. So she's like, yeah. So she was my therapy adjacent, or I forgot what we used to call her, but now she's, yeah, a life coach.
Wow. So you said loving yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that was a big one.
How do you explain that? And yeah, what does that look like?
So loving yourself, the way I explain it is learning to accept yourself in the context of your daily life. Every day is going to be different, which means you're going to show up differently every day. As much as we want consistency and safety, that's not quite exactly how it works. So you have to learn to be flexible, meaning you accept whatever part of you shows up today and you work with that part and adjust as need be. The goal in life is not consistency, it's actually flexibility and learning to adjust.
That's really good advice. Let's talk about some barriers to therapy. What are some common misconceptions and fears about therapy that you found in your practice?
Money, that's the number one. It's all about money. A lot of people don't understand their insurance, so they don't know what their deductible is. They don't know if necessarily they have great insurance. There's always a shortage of providers as well. So money's the big one, and then finding a therapist that actually meets your needs. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, which is perfectly fine. Sometimes I've been told I go way too deep, and
Hmm.
people aren't ready for that. So that's not a problem. Availability is also a big one because people are working. A lot of times they want the therapist to see them like 5 and after, but I'm sure, right, you can imagine trying to develop an evening shift is not feasible for the rest of that therapist's life. So now we gotta, right, accommodate. But then do you work Saturdays? Do you not? So money, availability, and then stigma, right? Because even if they get to you, well, I can't tell you how many times, especially older people, because I do see like 62 and up sometimes, they'll say, "Am I crazy, doc? Just tell me I'm crazy, man. Let me say you sometimes. Just tell me I'm crazy. My family's telling me I'm crazy." And it's like, you're not crazy. Here's actually a very logical, there's very seldom do people tell me things that don't have some sort of logical tangent. You just got to find it.
Hmm.
Find where it.
Since you mentioned people being 60 and older, and you're a gentleman of a certain age, I'm curious, do you ever, do you ever, because you see patients via telehealth, right?
All the time.
Um, do you ever get any pushback on your age or people questioning your skill set?
All the time. All the time. And it's the funniest thing, right? Because most of the time you selected me as your provider. So, but I get it, right? You've read my resume. You may have even seen some of them come into the session already thinking that, I got my PhD or I'm a psychiatrist, meaning a medical provider. They get all sorts of confused. So, between my credentials and everything else, I'm sure I'm a very confusing person on paper. But yeah, no, I've been asked my age, which I have no problem saying out loud, 29, right? Because it should be,
Proud, proud 29, right?
absolutely, it should be a good thing.
It
Because again,
is.
to be able to be in these spaces and have these conversations and to do it earlier on means I have so much more time to make an impact, which that's what it's about. So typically they'll ask me about my age. One guy literally told me, "Oh man, well I definitely got some more years on you, man. I'm in my 40s, man. You sure you're gonna be able to help me?" I tell you what, brother. What is it like to be you? And then races off. Now, hey, brother, man, you got another session this week, man. Can I see you twice in a week? Please. I like the way you broke that down, man. I ain't never realized that. Because again, it's refreshing when you start to find yourself outside of the way that everybody has described you. So now you're building that self definition, and that's what I offer.
Man, you're doing a fabulous job. And so, what is the first step someone should take to scheduling an appointment to see you?
And just reach out. I'm not a therapist that provides homework. All you got to do is reach out. I ask you just to show up. So you can reach out either by phone, email, websites. I'm on a couple of different platforms. I'm also expanding the team, which I'm sure I think we'll talk about later. So if you reach out, I'll follow up via email, via text. I have a HIPAA compliant email and text. So I may text you and email you. Everybody's preference, especially in the DMV, right? It's different. So we'll reach out. I'll get your insurance information, help you get connected, do an eligibility check, and then really all you have to do is electronically sign the consent forms, practice notification, And then after that, I'll tell you what your copay is. We'll talk about the finances, make sure everything is good to go. And then as long as you feel safe and comfortable, we'll schedule right then and there. So the process is super easy. It takes,
Man.
yeah, less than 30 seconds, less than 30 minutes.
All right. And so they go to your website. Do you want to say what the name of your website is?
Absolutely. So it is reclaimroyalty.net. So the agency name.net. And then right under services, you can find out about all of our different services, which providers are available, and then it'll allow you to schedule relatively quickly.
Wonderful. And it sounds like you take insurance.
Hmm.
Do you take
All
offer cash?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So all major insurances, and then even if we don't, we can do, as you were about to ask, a private pay option. The cost of a session is 150, so 150 per session, and 75 per session for a life coach. And then if there is an issue, we can always have conversations about what does a sliding scale look like, what do private pay options look like, what is your goal, and again, as I mentioned earlier, right, I'm trying to move into more of a subscription model, which is something my wife and I are in development about, because that would allow you to pay a monthly fee, but then in that monthly fee, that would cover the cost of 3 therapy sessions, maybe 2 life coaching sessions, all for that monthly subscription, and access to 2 or 3 support groups that we'd be opening up. So you would have essentially a full team of providers, all for, let's say, 200 or $150 a month. And if you break that down per week, that's actually very affordable.
And how long are the sessions?
50 minutes. So 50 minutes, just because it allows me time to work on any notes, refer you out, connect you to any resources, answer any final questions, which there's always questions, as I'm sure, right? And then schedule.
And do you two do couples therapy?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Marriage therapy, premarital therapy, couples, divorce, pretty much you name it. Sexual intimacy, all sorts of the full gambit. And also, and I'm sure you know this too, nobody ever comes in and sticks to only what they came in for.
oh, yeah. And then do you specialize in any particular area? I've talked to so many of you all, that some of you say, oh, this is kind of my cup of tea over here.
Yeah. Personally, I love to lean more into the anxiety type of issues, relationship dynamics, adjustment type of challenges, life transitions, depression. Grief is also another one that I enjoy. I know it sounds right, like a little bit of a sick puppy, but no, people want to talk to me about grief. So that's always good. Trauma is another one. And those are kind of like the main, but also that opens the door into family issues and a whole bunch of other things. So even though that may be my specific niche, they're all interconnected.
Do you have any special services for veterans?
At this time, we do not. However, I do have a supervisee that is really passionate about working with veterans. And one of the companies that I contract for, we actually do take TRICARE, which I know is extremely hard to find.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's awesome. And you see all age groups?
Personally, I just like more, I'll say maybe 14 to maybe 75. I think after 75, you may start seeing a little bit of a technology challenge, but
Mm.
I'm always flexible. We can always have a conversation.
Oh, okay, awesome. And so, 3 TMI takeaways. If there's anything people are going to remember after this episode, what are 3 takeaways you want them to remember?
Yeah, mental health is really just about how you feel and how you process the world. Give yourself permission to explore how to become the better you. And then therapy is possible if you allow it to be.
Well, we can't thank you enough for your time and talent. Really, really brilliant gentleman. Can't wait to bring you back and learn about your journey, as well as more services that you offer here in the to our country and our people. We'll have all the information that you provided today in the description box, how people can connect with you, your social media links, and yeah, I think that's all for now. Anything else you want to leave with the people with?
Just please, if you or somebody you know, especially during this holiday season, is going through, don't let them suffer in silence. Help them, encourage them, and also don't take that on yourself. We are professionals for a reason. So we love you guys, and please reach out. We got you.
Thank you so much. Remember, everyone, you can email us your questions and show ideas to tmi.melanin@gmail.com. If you haven't already, there's still time to subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when we release a new episode. Please take the time to share, comment, and rate us on Apple and Spotify. It helps the algorithm see that this information is important so that when people like you look for information like this, we'll show up higher in the search results. Like I said, everything we mentioned today will be below in the description box. At the time of this recording, we release new videos weekly on Sundays at noon Eastern on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and we drop the audio at 5 a.m. so our night shift friends can be the first to get something and not the last. And maybe someone will play it during huddle and tell us about it. We thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.